Welcome back to our channel, your ultimate destination for the most explosive, jaw-dropping daytime drama updates. Today is a spectacular day to dive headfirst into the glamorous, dangerous, and utterly ruthless world of Los Angeles fashion dynasties. The stakes have never been higher, and the fallout is about to change everything. Let us jump straight into the heart-stopping action. A deafening crash of shattered loyalties echoes through the hallowed, opulent halls of the legendary Forrester estate. The untouchable patriarch is down. Eric Forrester collapses onto the cold, unforgiving marble floor, his hands clutching his chest in a desperate, agonizing grasp for air. Standing over the gasping fashion icon is a feral, unhinged Will Spencer, his eyes wide with the sudden, horrifying realization of the lethal catastrophe he has just unleashed. This is no longer a simple family disagreement. This is no longer a tragic lover's quarrel. This is an apocalyptic act of war that will paint the streets of Los Angeles red. The Spencer vs. Forrester blood feud has just claimed its highest profile casualty, and the shockwaves will completely obliterate everything in their path. The cataclysmic nightmare begins under the cover of darkness. Will Spencer, driven by a blinding, desperate obsession to reclaim the woman he loves, refuses to accept defeat. He does not knock. He does not ask for permission. He infiltrates the heavily guarded Forrester stronghold like a thief in the night. The heavy oak doors of the mansion provide no barrier to a Spencer on a mission. Will's heart is pounding out of his chest, his adrenaline surging with a toxic mixture of profound heartbreak and boiling rage. He has been banished, humiliated, and stripped of his dignity by the Forrester family, but he is determined to bypass the guards, bypass the rules, and get directly to Elektra Forrester. He prowls through the dimly lit corridors, the portraits of Forrester ancestors glaring down at him, judging the Spencer heir who dares to trespass on their sacred ground. Will's breathing is ragged, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles are completely white. He is a man pushed to the absolute brink, a ticking time bomb of emotional devastation waiting for a single spark to detonate. He finds Elektra in the grand living room, the moonlight casting long, dramatic shadows across her tear-streaked face. Elektra is frozen, her eyes widening in sheer terror and disbelief as Will emerges from the darkness. She knows the danger he is in. She knows the absolute fury that will rain down upon him if he is discovered on this property. Will steps forward, his voice a desperate, pleading whisper that quickly escalates into a frantic demand for reconciliation. He begs her to ignore the family politics, to ignore the corporate warfare, to look past the violent brawls and the bitter rivalries. He reaches for her, his eyes burning with a manic intensity, desperate to pull her back into his orbit. But before Elektra can even process the shock of his sudden, forbidden appearance, the atmosphere in the room violently shifts. The temperature drops to freezing. A booming, authoritative voice shatters the tense silence, echoing off the high ceilings with the force of a thunderclap. Eric Forrester steps out of the shadows, his presence commanding, his fury absolute. The patriarch of the Forrester dynasty does not tolerate disrespect, and he certainly does not tolerate a rogue Spencer trespassing in his sanctuary. Eric's eyes are blazing with a righteous, protective fire. He has endured the relentless attacks from Logan Designs, he has navigated the treacherous waters of corporate espionage, and he has watched this young, volatile Spencer bring nothing but chaos and violence to his granddaughter's life. Eric marches forward, placing himself directly between Will and Elektra, a human shield of pure, unadulterated Forrester power. He points a trembling, authoritative finger directly at Will's chest, his voice vibrating with undeniable absolute command. He orders Elektra to kick Will to the curb immediately. He demands that she banish this toxic presence from her life once and for all. Eric's words are not a suggestion, they are a royal decree. He looks Will dead in the eye and delivers a merciless, uncompromising ultimatum: get out of this house, get off this property, and never, ever come near this family again. The absolute humiliation of being dressed down and banished by the Forrester patriarch is the exact spark that detonates the bomb inside Will Spencer's mind. The desperation in his eyes instantly morphs into a blinding, feral rage. The infamous Spencer temper, a dark and violent inheritance from his ruthless father, explodes to the surface with terrifying velocity. Will refuses to back down. He refuses to be treated like a peasant in a king's castle. He stands his ground, squaring his shoulders, his face contorting into a mask of pure, venomous hatred. The respect he once held for the elderly fashion icon evaporates in a millisecond, replaced by a vicious, uncontrollable desire to strike back, to wound, to destroy. Will closes the distance between them, invading Eric's personal space, his voice rising from a defensive shout to an ear-splitting, unhinged scream that rattles the very foundations of the mansion. Will unleashes a relentless, merciless verbal assault, tearing into Eric with a savagery that leaves Elektra gasping in horror. He screams that Eric is nothing but a massive, arrogant hypocrite. He accuses the patriarch of hiding behind a facade of family values while ruthlessly manipulating the lives of everyone around him. Will's voice cracks with raw, visceral fury as he accuses Eric of being entirely selfish, of actively and maliciously destroying his own granddaughter's happiness just to score a petty victory in the endless, exhausting Spencer-Forrester feud. The venom in Will's words is palpable, a toxic spill of suppressed anger and deep-seated resentment. He refuses to be the collateral damage in a war he did not start. He refuses to let Eric dictate the terms of his heart. Will's screams bounce off the walls, a terrifying symphony of rage that completely drowns out Elektra's desperate, frantic pleas for him to stop. But Will is too far gone. The red haze of fury has completely blinded him to the reality of the situation. He digs deep into the darkest, most painful chapters of the family's history, weaponizing the past to inflict maximum psychological damage in the present. Will violently throws Katie Logan's name into the patriarch's face. He screams about the sheer cruelty of Eric standing idly by, watching with cold indifference as Katie was unceremoniously fired and pushed out of Forrester Creations. Will weaponizes his mother's pain, using it as a blunt instrument to bludgeon Eric's moral superiority. He accuses Eric of being a disloyal, treacherous coward who abandons the people who love him the second it becomes politically convenient. The accusation hangs in the air, a heavy, suffocating cloud of historical betrayal that strikes Eric directly in the heart. Will is relentless, his verbal barrage accelerating, his words slicing through the air like razor-sharp daggers aimed perfectly at Eric's deepest insecurities. Then comes the ultimate, devastating blow. The insult that shatters the remaining fragile peace. Will leans in close, his eyes burning with a sickening, triumphant malice, and screams the most degrading, disrespectful words he can muster. He calls Eric an outdated old man. He roars that Eric has completely lost his touch, that his mind is failing, that he no longer possesses the clarity, the vision, or the strength to see the truth of the modern world. Will screams that Eric is a relic, a fading ghost haunting a legacy that has already passed him by. The sheer audacity, the profound disrespect of a young Spencer delivering such a vicious, calculated psychological strike to the legendary founder of Forrester Creations is staggering. Will's words are designed to humiliate, to emasculate, to completely break the spirit of the man standing before him. And tragically, horrifically, the devastating attack succeeds beyond Will's darkest, most twisted intentions. The physical toll of the relentless corporate wars, the betrayal of his wife Donna, the stress of the impending couture launch, and now this vicious, unhinged psychological assault proves to be an insurmountable burden for the elderly patriarch. Eric's face dramatically drains of all color, transforming into a sickly, terrifying shade of ashen gray. The authoritative fire in his eyes is instantly extinguished, replaced by a sudden, blinding panic. Eric staggers backward, his legs suddenly unable to support the weight of his own body. He raises a trembling hand, clutching desperately at the fabric of his shirt, directly over his wildly palpitating heart. A horrible, ragged gasp escapes his lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated physical agony that instantly freezes the blood in Will's veins. The invincible titan of the fashion industry is suddenly reduced to a fragile, failing mortal, succumbing to the overwhelming, crushing pressure of a massive cardiac event. Elektra's piercing, blood-curdling scream shatters the momentary silence. She lunges forward, her hands reaching out in a desperate, futile attempt to catch her beloved grandfather, but she is too late. Eric's knees buckle beneath him. The patriarch collapses, his body crashing heavily onto the cold marble floor with a sickening, terrifying thud. He writhes in agony, gasping for breath that simply will not come, his eyes rolling back in his head as the darkness rapidly closes in. The scene is a waking nightmare, a horrific tableau of tragedy and devastation playing out in the center of the Forrester living room. Electra drops to her knees beside him, sobbing hysterically, screaming his name, her hands frantically hovering over his convulsing form, completely powerless to stop the terrifying medical emergency unfolding right before her eyes. Will Spencer is instantly paralyzed. The feral rage that had consumed him vanishes in a split second, replaced by a suffocating, paralyzing wave of sheer, unadulterated horror. He stands frozen, his feet glued to the marble floor, staring down at the devastating consequences of his uncontrollable temper. The realization of what he has just done crashes over him like a tidal wave of guilt and terror. He did not physically strike Eric, but his vicious, venomous words were the lethal weapon that pulled the trigger. Will's breathing becomes shallow, his eyes wide with a manic panic. He looks at his hands as if they are covered in blood. He looks at Electra, whose face is twisted in an agonizing mask of grief and hatred as she desperately tries to keep her grandfather conscious. Will is trapped in a nightmare of his own making, fully aware that he has just crossed a line from which there is absolutely no return. He has destroyed any chance of reconciliation with Electra. He has ignited a war that will consume both of their families. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the grand living room fly open with explosive, violent force. Ridge Forrester bursts into the room, drawn by the terrifying echoes of Electra's desperate screams. The co-CEO of Forrester Creations freezes in his tracks, his eyes immediately locking onto the horrific scene before him. He sees his beloved father, the invincible founder of their dynasty, lying helpless and gasping on the floor. He sees his traumatized niece sobbing hysterically over the fallen patriarch. And then, he sees the intruder. He sees Will Spencer, standing over the wreckage, his face a portrait of undeniable, damning guilt. The transition in Ridge is instantaneous and terrifying. The concerned son vanishes, completely consumed by a dark, murderous, primal fury. Ridge's eyes turn black with a lethal, uncompromising hatred. Ridge lets out a guttural, terrifying roar, a sound born of pure, visceral agony and explosive rage. He does not ask for an explanation. He does not care about the context. All he sees is a Spencer standing over the broken body of his father. Ridge charges across the room, his entire being vibrating with a violent, uncontrollable desire for absolute vengeance. He drops to his knees beside Eric, his hands frantically checking his father's pulse, his voice cracking as he desperately orders Electra to call an ambulance. But even as he tends to the fallen king, Ridge's lethal glare remains locked onto Will. The air in the room becomes thick, suffocating, charged with the promise of imminent, catastrophic violence. Ridge's jaw is clenched so tightly it looks as though it might shatter. The Forrester heir is a man pushed beyond the limits of human reason, ready to unleash a hellfire of retribution unlike anything Los Angeles has ever witnessed. As the distant, terrifying wail of approaching sirens begins to pierce the night air, Ridge rises slowly to his feet. He does not rush at Will. He does not throw a punch. Instead, he delivers a promise that is infinitely more terrifying than any physical blow. Ridge's voice is eerily calm, a deadly, venomous whisper that slices through the chaotic tension of the room. He looks Will dead in the eye and issues a solemn, unbreakable blood vow. Ridge swears on his father's life, on the very legacy of the Forrester dynasty, that he will make the entire Spencer family pay in blood for this horrific, unforgivable attack. He promises to tear down Spencer Publications brick by brick. He promises to destroy Bill Spencer's life. And he promises Will that he will not rest, he will not sleep, until Will is locked behind bars, completely stripped of his freedom, his family, and his future. The war of the fashion houses is officially over. This is now a war of survival, a war of vengeance, a war of total, absolute annihilation. The sheer magnitude of Ridge's terrifying vow hangs heavily in the stifling air of the mansion, a dark and ominous cloud that completely suffocates any lingering hope for peace. Will Spencer remains entirely immobilized, a prisoner trapped inside his own shattering reality. His mind races frantically, replaying the vicious, venomous insults he hurled at the elderly patriarch, each word now echoing like a fatal gunshot in his memory. He had come to the estate seeking love, seeking a desperate second chance with Electra, but his volatile, uncontrollable Spencer temper has instead delivered a catastrophic, potentially lethal blow to the very heart of the Forrester family. He watches in absolute, paralyzing dread as paramedics violently burst through the grand entrance, their heavy boots pounding against the marble floors, their urgent, frantic voices barking medical commands as they swarm Eric's lifeless form. Will is violently shoved aside by the rushing first responders, treated as nothing more than an obstacle, a dangerous, toxic contaminant in the room. Elektra is pulled away from her grandfather's side, her entire body shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. She looks up, her tear-drenched eyes locking onto Will for one fleeting, agonizing second. There is no love left in her gaze. There is no understanding. There is only a profound, devastating horror and a deep, irrevocable hatred. That single, crushing look shatters whatever fragile remnants of Will's heart were still intact. He realizes, with a sickening, absolute certainty, that he has not only lost the woman he loves, but he has actively destroyed her. He has become the monster that Ridge and RJ always claimed he was. The realization is a physical blow, a crushing weight that forces the air from his lungs. Will stumbles backward, his legs trembling, his vision blurring as the chaotic, terrifying scene unfolds before him. He is a ghost in the room, a guilty, condemned man waiting for the inevitable execution. Meanwhile, Ridge Forrester is a terrifying portrait of lethal, contained fury. He stands rigid, his fists clenched at his sides, his eyes never leaving Will's trembling form even as he barks rapid-fire instructions to the paramedics. Ridge's mind is already operating at 1,000,000 miles an hour, formulating a ruthless, merciless strategy for total destruction. This was not a simple argument, this was a calculated, vicious psychological assault designed to break an elderly man. In Ridge's eyes, Will Spencer is guilty of attempted murder, and Bill Spencer is guilty by association for raising such a feral, uncontrollable beast. Ridge pulls out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he summons the Forrester legal team, his private security forces, and his most ruthless corporate allies. He is orchestrating a massive, overwhelming siege against the Spencer empire. The retaliation will be swift, it will be brutal, and it will be absolutely uncompromising. The paramedics frantically load Eric onto a stretcher, strapping an oxygen mask over his pale, ashen face. The patriarch is unresponsive, his life hanging by the thinnest, most fragile of threads. As they rush the stretcher toward the sweeping front doors, Ridge falls in step beside them, his hand resting protectively on his father's shoulder. But just before he crosses the threshold, Ridge stops. He turns back slowly, his lethal, predatory gaze locking onto Will one final time. The silence between them is deafening, heavier than any scream. Ridge does not need to repeat his blood vow, the promise of absolute, devastating vengeance is written in the cold, dead emptiness of his eyes. He turns and disappears into the night, leaving Will completely alone in the echoing, cavernous living room, surrounded by the shattered remnants of the Forrester legacy and the horrifying, inescapable reality of his own catastrophic actions. Will finally breaks out of his paralyzing trance. He stumbles blindly out of the mansion, the cool night air hitting his face like a physical blow. He runs. He runs as fast as his trembling legs will carry him, fleeing the scene of his horrific crime, fleeing the devastating judgment in Elektra's eyes, fleeing the terrifying, murderous wrath of Ridge Forrester. He does not know where he is going. He only knows that he must escape the suffocating, crushing weight of his own guilt. His mind is a chaotic, swirling vortex of panic and despair. He pulls out his phone, his hands shaking so violently he can barely unlock the screen. He needs his father. He needs Bill Spencer's power, his protection, his ruthless ability to manipulate the truth and make problems disappear. But as he dials the number, a sickening, terrifying realization washes over him: not even Dollar Bill Spencer can buy his way out of this apocalyptic nightmare. The fallout from this catastrophic confrontation will be seismic, a massive, devastating earthquake that will completely level the landscape of Los Angeles. The Forrester family will rally together, united by a profound, agonizing grief and a burning, unquenchable thirst for revenge. Steffi, already pushed to the absolute brink by Finn's delusional demands regarding Sheila, will channel her volcanic, apocalyptic fury toward the Spencers, unleashing a merciless corporate and personal assault. Brooke Logan will be violently torn apart, caught in the impossible, agonizing crossfire between her deep, enduring love for Ridge and the Forresters, and her blood loyalty to her sister Katie and the Spencer family. The fashion war between Forrester Creations and Logan Designs will instantly escalate from a bitter business rivalry into a vicious, cutthroat bloodbath, with no rules, no boundaries, and absolutely no mercy. And what of Katie Logan? The ambitious, triumphant CEO of Logan Designs, currently riding high on the massive success of Hope's debut collection, is about to have her entire world violently ripped apart. She is busy plotting scandalous media stunts and celebrating her newfound independence, completely, blissfully unaware that her beloved son is at the center of a horrific, potentially fatal tragedy. When the news breaks, when she learns that Will's unhinged, feral rage has left Eric Forrester fighting for his life, Katie will be plunged into a terrifying, agonizing nightmare. She will be forced to choose between defending her son against the overwhelming, murderous wrath of the Forrester dynasty, and facing the horrifying, undeniable truth about the monster he has become. The Logan sisters will be fractured, the Spencer empire will be besieged, and the Forrester legacy will be forever stained by this catastrophic, unforgettable night of violence and betrayal. Will Eric Forrester survive this devastating, massive cardiac event, or has Will Spencer's vicious, venomous psychological assault claimed the life of the legendary patriarch? Will Ridge successfully execute his terrifying, uncompromising blood vow and completely obliterate the Spencer family, or will Dollar Bill unleash his own brand of ruthless, lethal protection to save his son from a life behind bars? Share your wildest theories below, and subscribe now to ensure you never miss a single second of the explosive fallout.